She was hired to clean the dust from a billionaire's secrets. But when Maria unlocked a door that wasn't on the blueprints, she didn't just find hidden treasure. She found the reason she could never leave alive. In one moment, she became his most valuable asset and his permanent prisoner. This is what happens when the invisible help finally sees what's really hidden in the house. Her name was Maria. For 2 years, she was just another invisible face in the army of domestic staff serving the global elite. But the man she worked for wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He was Alexander Voronin, a Russian oligarch whose fortune was built on shadows and whose Chicago mansion was a fortress of secrets. The question was never if Maria would see something she shouldn't. It was what would happen when she did. And on that rain-lashed Tuesday night, she finally found her answer. Maria's life before that night was a study in calculated invisibility. A Polish immigrant with a temporary visa, she was one of 12 staff maintaining Voronin's 20,000-square-foot monument to access on Chicago's Gold Coast. Her world was backs of hallways, service elevators, and the unspoken rule: see nothing, hear nothing, say nothing. The pay in cash was triple what she could make in a hotel. The cost was her autonomy. Her passport was held by the head of housekeeping, a stern former KGB officer named Gregor. Her phone was scanned. Her movements within the house were tracked by a network of silent, omnipresent cameras. She lived in a small, windowless room in the staff wing, a space that felt less like a bedroom and more like a holding cell. Alexander Voronin was a ghost in his own home. He was a founding member of the St. Petersburg Oligarchy, a man who had emerged from the chaotic privatizations of the 90s with a fortune in metals, oil, and, according to persistent whispers, darker commodities. Sanctioned by 3 Western governments, he had transplanted his life to Chicago a decade earlier, using a labyrinth of shell companies to buy his way into legitimacy. The mansion was his castle, but also his gilded cage. He hosted politicians and bankers in the Grand Salon, while teams of lawyers and accountants in a soundproofed office wing worked to keep his empire and his enemies at bay. For Maria, Voronin was a silhouette glimpsed from a distance. A tall, severe man in tailored suits, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes the color of a winter lake. He never acknowledged her. To him, she was furniture. That was the entire point. To be unseen was to be safe. But safety in that house was an illusion. Gregor's weekly briefings were clear. Any breach of protocol, any curiosity, would result in immediate deportation or worse. "There are no police here," Gregor would say, his voice flat. "Only consequences." The discovery happened because of a storm. A late autumn gale sweeping in from Lake Michigan had knocked out power to the East Wing's security grid for 47 minutes. While technicians scrambled, Maria was tasked with checking for water leaks in the long, wood-paneled gallery that housed Voronin's collection of forbidden art, pieces looted, stolen, or bought from black markets. It was during this check, running her hand along the ornate molding, that she felt it. A slight give beneath a carved panel depicting the myth of Prometheus. A soft, hydraulic hiss, and a section of the wall, 6 feet tall, swung inward. The air that wafted out was cold, sterile, and smelled of ozone. Not a panic room, something else. Against every screaming instinct, Maria stepped inside. The door hissed shut behind her. The space was a vault, perhaps 15 feet square. Instead of gold or cash, the walls were lined with servers, their LED lights blinking like a constellation of silent stars. In the center of the room stood a single, sleek terminal, and on a pedestal beside it, a physical ledger bound in red leather. She shouldn't have touched it, but the sight of her own country's name leaping from an open page froze her. It was a list of dates, coordinates, and sums in euros, dollars, and rubles. Payments routed through Gdansk's port. Shipments labeled industrial parts with values in the tens of millions. It was a map of a shadow economy, and next to one entry, a scrawled note in Russian. Maria's Russian was basic, but she knew one phrase: Elika verideratse iyaroteger eruzeka. Liquidation of cargo, a date from 6 months prior, and a location less than a mile from her sister's apartment in Warsaw. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just hidden wealth. This was a record of crimes, transactions that could unravel Voronin's entire facade and implicate powerful people across continents. In a daze, driven by a panic she couldn't name, Maria did the unthinkable. She pulled out the cheap burner phone she kept hidden in her cleaning cart's battery compartment, a forbidden lifeline to her family. She snapped photos, Dozens of them, pages of the ledger, screens from the terminal. The proof of a lifetime. The door hissed open. The overhead lights in the vault snapped on, blindingly bright. Maria spun, the phone clutched to her chest. Alexander Voronin stood in the doorway, filling it. He wasn't in a suit. He wore a dark robe, and his expression was not one of rage, but of cold, terrifying calculation. Behind him stood Gregor, a pistol held loosely at his side. "You were not scheduled to be on this floor tonight," Voronin said, his voice quiet, devoid of any accent. It was the first time he had ever spoken directly to her. Maria couldn't speak. She tried to hide the phone behind her back. "Do not," Voronin said, the command slicing through the air. "Gregor." In two strides, Gregor was on her, his hand a vice around her wrist. He pried the phone from her numb fingers and handed it to Voronin. Voronin glanced at the screen, at the incriminating images. He scrolled. His face showed nothing. He powered the phone off and slipped it into his pocket. "You understand what this is," he stated, nodding toward the ledger. Maria managed a faint nod, tears of terror now streaming down her face. "Good, then you also understand that if this information were to leave this room, several governments would act. People would die, my people, your people." He stepped closer, looking down at her. "Including your sister in Warsaw, the one who lives at Aleja Solidarnoskai, apartment 402. The blood drained from Maria's face. He knew, he had always known. "The normal course of action is obvious," Voronin continued, packing slowly around her like a shark. "You are a liability. Liabilities are removed." He paused, letting the word removed hang in the silent, cold air. "But Gregor tells me you are meticulous, unobtrusive. You have a keycard that accesses every non-critical room in this house. You are, for all intents and purposes, a ghost." He stopped in front of her again. "So I am faced with a choice: eliminate a problem or repurpose it." Maria stared, not comprehending. "The men I dine with, the ministers and CEOs, they are not my friends. They are my opponents in a very quiet war. They try to plant their own ghosts in my house. They're spies, they're listening devices. Gregor catches many, but not all." Voronin's Winterlake eyes locked onto hers. "You have just demonstrated a unique talent for finding things that are hidden. You will now use it for me. You will become my canary in the coal mine. You will clean and you will listen. You will look for the anomalies, the new wire, the dust that has been disturbed, the guard who is too alert. You will report only to me." It was not an offer, it was a verdict. "And if I refuse?" Maria whispered, already knowing the answer. Voronin's smile was thin and humorless. He gestured to the ledger. "You have already taken your first step into this world, Maria. There is no refusal. There is only service, or there is silence, the permanent kind, for you and for your family in Poland." Gregor nudged her forward, back out into the gallery. The hidden door sealed shut behind them, the wall once again a seamless masterpiece. "Welcome to your new role," Voronin said, his tone now that of a CEO addressing a new hire. "Your visa is now permanent, as is your residence here. You will move to a different room tonight, one with a better view and a stronger lock." He turned to leave, then glanced back. "The phone, of course, stays with me. Think of those photos as your employment contract, signed in blood you did not know you spilled." That was how Maria's imprisonment began, not in chains, but in a gilded cage of her own making. She was given a raise, a nicer room that still locked from the outside, and a new monitored phone. Her cleaning duties continued, but now every swipe of a rag, every vacuumed corner, was an act of espionage. She was both Voronin's secret weapon and his hostage, and the first test of her new loyalty was coming sooner than she could imagine. 1 week later, while polishing the banister of the main staircase, she overheard two of Voronin's junior accountants speaking in rushed, nervous tones in the hallway below. They were discussing a discrepancy, a payment routed to a Dubai holding company that didn't match any known contract, a ghost invoice. One of them muttered a name, Kovac. The other hushed him violently. That night, Maria reported the name and the invoice to Voronin in his study. The next morning, the two accountants were gone. Transferred, she was told, but the look in Gregor's eyes told a different story. She had proven her value, and in doing so, she had crossed a line from which there was no return. She was complicit. The photos on her burner phone were not just her death sentence. They were now her shackles, chaining her to Voronin's fate. He owned her fear, and he was beginning to own her silence. But deep within the panic, a new, dangerous seed was germinating. Knowledge was power, and Maria was now accumulating a fortune of it. The question was, in a house built on secrets, who would eventually own whose? The silence after the accountants vanished was the loudest sound Maria had ever heard. It was a lesson written in absence. Her words had weight, deadly weight. Voronin's trust was a serpent, coiling around her, equal parts protection and suffocation. Her new room, while larger, had a reinforced door and a camera in the ceiling corner, its red eye never blinking. The better view was of the high walls surrounding the estate, topped with razor wire. She was now a prized pet in a very beautiful, very secure kennel. Her instructions became more direct. Voronin would leave subtle markers, a book moved a quarter-inch on a shelf, a specific pen on his desk, that signaled she was to sweep a particular room for electronic surveillance that evening. Gregor provided her with a handheld device, a nonlinear junction detector that could find hidden transmitters. She learned to feel for the slight vibration that indicated a listening device in a lamp, behind a painting, woven into the upholstery. She found 3 in the first month. Each discovery was met with Voronin's grim nod. No praise, just a silent tally of her usefulness. But Maria was learning faster than anyone anticipated. The house was a living organism, and its nervous system was the secret server room. She began to notice patterns. Certain guests, a Swiss banker, a Texas oilman, would visit, and within days, Voronin would have her sweep his private study with intense focus. After the Texas oilman, she found a sophisticated bug embedded in the leg of a Chippendale chair. That night, Voronin didn't just nod, he spoke. "The Americans are getting bold," he mused, staring at the dissected device on his desk. "Their Treasury Department, they think they can cage me with their sanctions. They send businessmen with microphones instead of subpoenas." He looked at Maria, really looked at her, as if seeing a new component in a machine. "You have a good eye. Do you know what this means?" Maria shook her head, her throat tight. "It means the pressure is increasing. The walls are closing in for all of us." He leaned back. "Gregor tells me you are quiet, that you do not complain. This is good. Loyalty and silence is the only currency that matters now." But Maria's silence was a growing scream. She was drowning in the details of Voronin's world. She overheard phone calls through vents, caught fragments of encrypted messages left on screens. She pieced together a mosaic of fear. Voronin wasn't just afraid of the Americans. He was terrified of someone he called the creditor. Payments, massive ones, were scheduled and discussed with a reverence bordering on dread. The Dubai ghost invoice she had uncovered was linked to this. The name Kovac was whispered again, this time by Voronin himself in a tense, late-night call in Russian. Maria's Russian was improving out of sheer survival. She heard "final warning" and "Lithuanian pipeline." Then in early December, the first external shockwave hit. Maria was cleaning the formal dining room after dinner for 6. As she cleared the crystal, her rag brushed against a sleek smartphone left on a sideboard. It lit up, a news alert, in both English and Polish. The headline, "Prominent Gdańsk port official found dead in apparent suicide." The name was the same as one from the Red Ledger. The man whose signature was next to the liquidation of cargo note near her sister's address. The glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. The sound brought Gregor in an instant. He saw the phone, saw her face. He didn't yell. He simply took the phone, read the alert, and his expression hardened. "Clean this up," he said flatly, "and do not touch the guest's property again." This was no coincidence. The ledger was a death warrant, and people were being erased line by line. Voronin hadn't just shown her his crimes, he had made her a witness to their consequences. That night, in the stifling silence of her room, a switch flipped. Fear curdled into a cold, clear resolve. She needed a way out, not just for herself, but for her family. And to get out, she needed more than what was on that burner phone. She needed the key to the entire vault. Her opportunity came from an unexpected source: vulnerability. Voronin, the unflappable oligarch, fell ill. A severe flu, his doctor said, contracted during a trip to Munich. For 3 days, he was confined to his bedroom suite, feverish and uncharacteristically frail. Security protocol shifted. Gregor was constantly at his side. The usual rhythms of the house stuttered. And in that stutter, Maria saw a gap. She was tasked with bringing tea and broth to the anteroom outside Voronin's bedroom. On the second day, she noticed the routine. The doctor came at noon. At 12:20, Gregor would escort him downstairs, a 15-minute window where the door to the suite was left slightly ajar, guarded only by a younger, less observant security man named Dmitri, who was often distracted by his own phone. On the third day, Maria's cart carried more than tea. Hidden in the hollow handle of her mop was a simple, plastic thumb drive she'd taken from a supply closet. It was a reckless, stupid gamble. If caught, it would mean the end. But the image of the dead port official's face, superimposed over her sister's, propelled her forward. The routine held. The doctor left with Gregor. Dmitri stood by the door, scrolling. Maria pushed her cart into the anteroom, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. He asked for more water, she said to Dmitri, her voice barely a whisper. Dmitri grunted, not looking up. Be quick. She slipped inside Voronin's bedroom. It was dim, the curtains drawn. The air smelled of medicine and sweat. Voronin was asleep, his breathing ragged. On the nightstand, next to a glass of water, was his laptop. It was open. A screensaver of a snowy St. Petersburg street drifted across the display. This was it. Every second was a lifetime. She listened for Dmitri, then touched the trackpad. The screen woke, prompting for a password. She froze. This was a dead end. But then she noticed a small, silver hardware token plugged into a USB port. A two-factor key. He must have been working before falling asleep. The system might still be authenticated. With trembling hands, she inserted her thumb drive. The file system opened. Her eyes scanned frantically, dozens of folders cryptically named. Then she saw it, a folder labeled Carrier d'Héritier or Heir Creditor. She opened it, selected all, and initiated a copy. The progress bar crawled. 10%, 20. The sound of the copying file was deafening in the quiet room. A groan from the bed. Maria froze, her blood turning to ice. Voronin stirred, his head turning on the pillow. His eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever. They focused slowly on her, standing by his desk. Maria, he mumbled, his voice thick. What? Water, sir, she whispered, gesturing to the cart near the door. I brought fresh water. He blinked, confused, his illness-addled mind struggling to process the intrusion. He looked at the laptop, then back at her. A frown began to form on his brow. The progress bar hit 70%. Come on, come on. Why is the light, Voronin muttered, trying to sit up. 85%. Dmitri's voice came from the doorway. Everything okay in here? Maria's hand shot out, grabbing the glass of water from the nightstand. Yes, yes, he is awake for a moment. Here, sir. She moved to the bedside, blocking his view of the laptop with her body, helping him sip the water. The progress bar completed, 100%, a soft chime. Voronin's eyes snapped to the laptop, the sound cutting through his fever. His confusion evaporated, replaced by dawning, cold clarity. Maria yanked the thumb drive free, palming it instantly. Rest, sir, she said, her voice miraculously steady. She turned and walked toward her cart, slipping the drive into the hidden mop handle as she moved. Stop, Voronin croaked, pushing himself up on his elbows. His voice was weak but sharp as a blade. Maria didn't turn around. She kept walking toward Dmitri in the doorway. He is disoriented, she said to the guard, her face a mask of concerned sympathy. The fever. Dmitri glanced past her at his boss, who was now pointing a shaky finger. You, laptop. But the moment had passed. Maria was already in the anteroom, pushing her cart. By the time Voronin's command fully formed, by the time Dmitri understood and stepped into the room, Maria was in the hallway, turning the corner toward the service elevator, the tiny piece of plastic in her handle containing a thermonuclear secret. She didn't breathe until she was back in the basement laundry, the roar of industrial washers covering the sound of her panicked gasps. She had it, but she had also been seen. Voronin might have been sick, but he was not a fool. The clock, which had been ticking slowly, was now pounding like a judge's gavel. That night, hidden in the deafening laundry room, she plugged the drive into a donated, offline tablet. The creditor folder contained one primary file, a contract. It was not in Russian, but in English. a 50-page legal agreement between Voronin Holdings and an entity called Peregrine Capital, LLC. The terms were brutal. It outlined a series of massive loans made to Voronin over the past 5 years, collateralized against his entire global asset portfolio, his mines, his ships, his secretly held shares in European football clubs. The interest rate was predatory, the payment schedule was impossible. And the penalty for default was not financial. It was spelled out in chilling, clear legalese. In the event of non-performance, all collateral shall be forfeit, and Peregrine Capital, or its designated agents, shall assume full operational control of said assets, utilizing any and all means necessary to effect peaceful transfer of title. It was a corporate raiders document, but it read like a mob ultimatum. The final page held the signature that made Maria's blood run cold. The managing director of Peregrine Capital, LLC, the creditor. The name was Nikolai Kovac. The pieces slammed together. Kovac wasn't a competitor. He was Voronin's puppet master. The ghost invoices, the terrified payments, the Lithuanian pipeline, it was all tribute to a more powerful, more ruthless oligarch. Voronin was drowning in debt he could never repay, and Kovac was tightening the noose, demanding more and more until he could legally seize everything. The pressure from American sanctions was Voronin's biggest problem. It was a distraction from the vulture circling his own nest. And then Maria found the annex. A single PDF, a due diligence report on the collateral. It listed physical assets. One entry made her stomach drop. It was a warehouse on the outskirts of Warsaw, its coordinates familiar. The due diligence report included photos, not of goods but of people, women and young men, faces blurred but their postures screaming exhaustion and fear. A human inventory, the liquidation of cargo from the ledger. Kovac wasn't just a financier. His means necessary included trafficking. Voronin's port deals were facilitating it. She held proof of 2 layers of monstrosity, Voronin's financial crimes and Kovac's human ones, and she was trapped between them. The photos from the vault implicated her in the first layer. This new information connected her to the second, more horrific one. If Kovac found out she had this, her sister wouldn't just be threatened, she'd become a line item in a warehouse report. 3 days later, Voronin summoned her. He was recovered, sitting behind his vast desk, his demeanor restored to its glacial calm, but his eyes held a new, penetrating intensity. Gregor stood behind him, a statue of menace. "You were in my room while I was ill," Voronin stated, no greeting, no preamble. "I brought water, sir, as instructed. You were at my desk. I placed the glass on the nightstand. You were disoriented. I helped you drink." She kept her gaze level, her voice respectful, a performance for her life. Voronin stared at her for a full minute, the silence stretching thin. "My laptop was awake," he said finally. "It goes to sleep after 2 minutes. It was awake." "Perhaps you touched it before I entered, sir. I did not notice." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Maria, look around you. This house is a system. I am the engineer. I know when a component behaves outside its parameters. Your parameters are cleanliness and observation, not computer literacy." He let the word hang. "I will ask once. Did you interact with my computer?" This was the cliff's edge. Denial was her only path. Any flicker of guilt, any hesitation, and Gregor would make her disappear. She thought of the women in the warehouse photo. She summoned their fear, let it drown out her own. She met his gaze, allowing a flicker of confused hurt to surface. "I do not know how to use such a computer, sir. I polish the wood around it, that is all." Voronin's eyes narrowed, searching for a crack in her facade. He found none. With a slow nod, he leaned back. "Very well, perhaps I was mistaken, the fever." He didn't believe her, but he couldn't prove anything, not yet. "Your duties are expanding. We are having a guest next week, a very important guest. You will prepare the lakeside guest house. You will be the sole attendant for its duration, no other staff. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "This guest values discretion above all else. You will see nothing. You will hear nothing. You will be a ghost. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, sir." "Good, dismissed." As she left, her back prickling under their combined gaze, she understood the true meaning of the assignment. It wasn't promotion. It was isolation. They were moving her to a controlled environment, away from the main house's information flow, where she could be watched even more closely. The guest house was a beautiful prison within the prison. The guest arrived on a Tuesday, shrouded in a downpour. From her small preparation room in the guest house, Maria saw a blacked-out Maybach glide down the drive. A man emerged, surrounded by a security detail that moved with military precision. He was tall, with a shaved head and a goatee, wearing a long black coat. He didn't look at the house. He looked asterisk at asterisk it, as if assessing its structural integrity for demolition. Gregor escorted him directly to the main living area. Through the serving hatch, Maria caught a glimpse. Voronin was already there, standing not behind his desk, but in front of it. A subordinate's posture. He gestured for the man to sit in the primary chair. The man's name was never spoken aloud, but Maria knew. She had seen his signature. This was Nikolai Kovac. The creditor had come to collect, and Maria, the ghost, was now the only soul close enough to hear the terms of her own master's surrender and the horrific price of his failure. The air in the guest house changed when Nikolai Kovac entered. It became thinner, sharper, charged with a silent violence. Maria moved through her duties like an automaton, polishing surfaces that already gleamed, her ears straining to catch every syllable that leaked through the heavy oak door of the study. The first hour was a murmur of formalities in Russian, too low to decipher. Then, Kovac's voice rose, a cold, whip-crack sound that bypassed the door. The timetable is not a suggestion, Alexander, it is an expiration date. Voronin's reply was placating, but strained. The assets are liquidating. The Malaysian sale closes next week. You will have your payment. I do not want the payment, Kovac cut him off. I told you, the terms have changed. The market is volatile. Cash is paper. I want the deed. A long silence. Maria froze, a silver creamer in her hand. The deed to the house, Voronin's voice was barely audible. To the estate, all 40 acres. The zoning approval came through last month. This parcel is now entitled for a mixed-use development. Its value has tripled. It is cleaner collateral. This is my home. It was your home. Now it is a liability on my balance sheet. You will sign it over, you and your wife, a gift for my continued patience. Maria's mind raced. Kovac wasn't just seizing Voronin's overseas assets, he was taking the fortress itself, evicting him. It was the ultimate humiliation. And in return, Voronin asked, the defeat in his voice palpable. In return, I extend the loan on the Lithuanian pipeline for another 6 months, and I forget about your creative accounting with the Gdansk proceeds. Kovac's tone turned oily. I know about the girl, by the way, the Polish cleaner, the one you have playing spy. Gregor is not as subtle as he thinks. Maria's blood turned to ice in her veins. She stopped breathing. She is a useful tool, Voronin said defensively. She is a witness, Kovac corrected. To your failures and to my operations, the warehouse incident, she connects dots. Dots lead to investigators. Investigators lead to headlines. I do not like headlines. She is contained. She has no allies, no resources. Containment is not termination, Kovac said flatly. When you transfer the property, you will also transfer the problem. She is part of the staff. She comes with the land. I will deal with the loose end, permanently. The silence that followed was a death sentence. Maria leaned against the wall, her legs buckling. Kovac hadn't just come to collect a debt. He had come to inventory the furniture, and she was listed under miscellaneous to be disposed of. The meeting ended shortly after. Maria heard the scrape of chairs, the clink of a glass. She fled to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she pretended to arrange canapés. Through the window, she saw them on the terrace. Kovac lit a cigar, gazing out at the lake as if surveying his new kingdom. Voronin stood beside him, shoulders slumped, a king stripped of his crown. As Kovac's motorcade departed, Voronin did not return to the main house. He walked to the guest house. He found Maria in the kitchen, her back to him. You heard, he stated. It wasn't a question. She didn't turn around, she simply nodded. Then you understand the position we are in, he said. The we was deliberate, a thread of solidarity thrown over a bottomless pit. He is going to kill me, Maria whispered. Voronin didn't contradict her. He poured himself a vodka from the decanter, drinking it neat. Kovac is a businessman. He eliminates variables that threaten profit. Currently, you are a variable. You promised me protection, she said, finally facing him, anger cutting through her fear. You said service or silence. I served. This is my reward. A flicker of something, shame, perhaps, crossed Voronin's face. The calculus has changed. I am no longer the sole author of consequences. He set the glass down, but there is another variable Kovac has not considered. Maria waited. He believes I am defeated. He believes I will sign my home away and slink into the night to be a beggar at his table. He is wrong. Voronin's eyes regained a sliver of their old, calculating steel. I have one move left, a dangerous one. It requires precise timing, and it requires you. Me. The deed transfer will happen at the signing here in 5 days. His lawyers, my lawyers, a notary. After the signing, he will consider the asset his, including you. He will not act before then. It would complicate the transaction. That gives us 5 days. To do what? To give Kovac a bigger problem than a cleaning lady with curious eyes. Voronin stepped closer. The data you took from my laptop, the Peregrine contract, you still have it. Maria's heart hammered. He knew, he had always known. Do not deny it. The fever did not make me a fool. I had the system logs checked. A data transfer occurred. The only person in the room was you. He held up a hand to silence her protest. I am not angry. I am impressed. It showed initiative, a survival instinct. Now I need you to use that instinct for both of us. What do you want? Want you to become a leak, a targeted, controlled leak. He outlined it coldly, like a military operation. Maria would use the guest house's isolated internet line, which Kovac's security had already swept and deemed clean, to make contact. Not with the police, not with the media. They were too slow, too corruptible. She would contact the one organization Kovac truly feared, the System Analysis Department of the United States Treasury, the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. Their Russian elites, proxies and oligarchs task force. They have been sniffing around me for years. They have fragments. You have the blueprint, the contract, the ledger, the warehouse photos. You send it to a specific agent, a man named Colin Bryce. His contact is in the file. You make it untraceable. You make it compelling. You give them Kovac. Maria was stunned. You want me to hand your creditor to the Americans? I want to create a fire so large in Kovac's front yard that he forgets about a speck of dust in his new house, Voronin hissed. When the Treasury freezes his assets, when they launch a full investigation, he will be fighting for his freedom, not worrying about a deed or a maid. It will delay everything. It may even break him. And you, this implicates you too. It implicates me in financial crimes, sanction violations, money laundering. I have lawyers for that. It is a chess game I can play for years in courts. What it does not do is give him my home tomorrow or get you killed the day after. He looked at her, his gaze intense. This is the only move, Maria. It is mutually assured destruction aimed at the larger target. Do you understand? She did. It was a monstrous gamble. If it failed, Kovac would tear them apart. If it succeeded, Voronin might survive in a diminished form, and she might, what, be free, or be forever a target, a witness they'd all want to silence. Why would the Americans believe me? I am a nobody. You are a primary source with digital evidence from inside the fortress. They will believe you because they want to believe you. You are their golden ticket. He produced a small, encrypted USB drive. This is a clean packet. Everything they need is pre-formatted. Dates, summaries, key files extracted from the larger data you have. You hit send. That is all. Maria took the drive. It felt heavy as a brick. And after I send it. After you send it, we wait. The reaction will be swift. Kovac's world will begin to unravel, and when it does, you will no longer be his primary concern. You will have a new protector, the interest of the United States government. It was a devil's bargain. Betray one monster to another, in hopes the second monster would shield her from the first, but it was the only thread she had to grasp. She spent the next 2 days in a state of suspended terror, preparing the guest house for the supposed signing ceremony, while every nerve was tuned to the mission. On the third night, under the cover of a howling storm that masked digital noise, she plugged in the drive. She followed Voronin's precise instructions, using a series of anonymizing relays. She found Agent Colin Bryce's secure portal. The prompt was simple: report suspicious activity. Her fingers hovered over the keys. This was the point of no return. Once this information left the house, there was no recalling it. The lives it would impact, the chaos it would unleash, it was all on her. She thought of the faces in the warehouse photo. She thought of her sister. She hit send. The confirmation screen blinked. Submission received. Thank you for your vigilance. Nothing happened. The silence after the sent message was more terrifying than any sound. Had it worked? Had it been intercepted? The next 36 hours were an agony of normalcy. She cleaned. She arranged flowers. She smiled at Gregor, who watched her with a newfound, suspicious intensity. Then, on the morning of the 5th day, the day of the signing, the world shifted. Maria was setting the table in the guesthouse dining room when Voronin stormed in, his face alight with a fierce, grim triumph. He held a tablet. On it was a headline from the Financial Times: U.S. Treasury designates Nikolai Kovac and Peregrine Capital as transnational criminal organization, freezes billions in assets. It had worked, and faster than anyone imagined. He is on a plane out of Switzerland right now, heading to a country with no extradition, Voronin said, his voice vibrating with adrenaline. His lawyers have cancelled. The signing is off. He is fighting for his life. For a fleeting moment, Maria felt a surge of elation. They had done it. They had pushed back the tide. That's when Gregor entered. His face was ashen. He held a satellite phone. "Sir, a call from a blocked number. He says it is urgent." Voronin took the phone, putting it on speaker. "Yes." The voice that came through was Kovac, but stripped of its cold control, replaced by a raw, venomous rage. "You treacherous little man. You think you are clever. You think the Americans are your shield." "The game has changed, Nikolai," Voronin said, though his confidence seemed to falter at the tone. "The game is over," Kovac screamed. "You handed them my books, but you forgot, Alexander, I have yours, every transaction, every sin, and I have something else. I have the source." Maria's blood ran cold. "The submission to the Treasury," Kovac snarled. "It was traced, not to you, to an IP address inside your guest house, to a device registered to your staff network, to her, your little spy. Did you think I would not have a backdoor into your systems? I own the server your security runs on." Voronin's eyes shot to Maria, wide with dawning horror. Their plan hadn't been clever. It had been a trap within a trap. Kovac had let them run right into it. "You have made your choice," Kovac spat, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You have chosen the maid over our arrangement, so be it. I cannot touch my assets now, but I can still touch what is mine. The property is still yours for the moment, and the staff is still yours, including her." The line crackled. "I have a team nearby. They are not here for the deed. They are here for the girl, to send a message about what happens to those who cross me, and to send a message to you, Alexander, about the cost of betrayal. They are coming to the house. Tonight, good luck hiding her, and when they are done, I will be back for everything else." The call went dead. The triumph in the room evaporated, replaced by a chilling vacuum. They hadn't won. They had simply triggered the endgame. Kovac, backed into a corner, was deploying his final, most brutal asset: sheer, unrestrained violence. Voronin looked at Maria, not as an asset, but as a corpse waiting to happen. The Americans had their designation, but they didn't have boots on the ground. Kovac's team did, and they were coming, not in 5 days, not tomorrow, tonight. The walls of the gilded cage were no longer just a barrier to keep Maria in. They were about to become a kill box, and the hunters had just been given the address. The silence after Kovac's threat was the most profound sound Maria had ever heard. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. Voronin stared at the dead phone in his hand, then at Maria, his calculations visibly crumbling. "He traced it," Voronin breathed, not to her, but to the universe that had just betrayed his logic. "He was waiting for us to make a move." Gregor was already in motion, barking into his own radio, alerting the perimeter guards. The response was static, then panicked shouts in Russian. The first crack of gunfire echoed from the front gate, distant but horrifyingly clear. The hunt was not coming tonight. It was here. Main house. Now, Voronin commanded, grabbing Maria's arm and pulling her toward the door connecting the guest house to the main residence. They will isolate and clear the outbuildings first. They ran through the covered stone walkway, the storm lashing rain sideways. From the main kitchen, chaos greeted them. Two of Voronin's security men were barricading the service entrance with a heavy table. A third was on the floor, clutching a bleeding leg. The staccato pops of suppressed weapons came from the direction of the guardhouse. How many? Voronin demanded. At least 6, maybe 8, a guard gasped. Professional, they took out the cameras and the gate team in under a minute. Voronin's fortress, designed to keep threats out and secrets in, was now a cage with the wolves inside. He shoved Maria toward Gregor. Get her to the vault. The door is biometric and 12-inch steel. Nothing short of explosives is getting through. Lock her in. Maria recoiled. No, you can't lock me in there. The vault was a tomb. Once inside, she'd be entirely at their mercy if they survived. It is the only room in this house that is truly secure, Voronin roared, his composure finally fracturing under the assault. You will be safe. Safe until you lose, and then I starve to death in a metal box. Maria shot back. An idea, desperate and insane, crystallized in her panic. I know a better way. Both men stared at her. The storm tunnel from the basement. It leads to the boathouse and from there to the lake. You said you wanted me to disappear. Let me disappear for real, right now. Voronin's eyes narrowed. The tunnel entrance is in the basement laundry. That is across the house, through open corridors. It is a gauntlet. It's a chance, Maria pleaded. Better than a coffin. And if I get out, I still have the full files. The ones I didn't send to the treasury. The originals. If I die in that vault, they die with me. If I get to the water, maybe I live. And maybe what I know stays useful to someone. It was a gambit, leveraging the last shred of her value. Voronin saw the logic. Her death in the vault gained him nothing. Her escape, however unlikely, kept a thread of his enemy's destruction alive in the world. He made the decision in a heartbeat. Gregor, take her, 2 men, get her to the tunnel, then fall back to the panic room on the 2nd floor. Gregor nodded grimly, grabbing a submachine gun from a wall rack. He gestured to 2 unwounded guards. You with me. They moved in a hurried, low crouch through the servants' corridors, Gregor leading. The mansion was a symphony of alarms and conflicting noises, breaking glass, shouts, the thump of a concussion grenade from the east wing. Kovac's team was methodical, violent, and fast. They reached the basement stairs. Gregor went first, clearing the landing. The basement was dark, only emergency strips lighting the way toward the laundry. The hum of industrial appliances was a familiar comfort that now felt grotesque. They were halfway across the open space when the door from the main stairwell burst open. 2 figures in black tactical gear filled the doorway. There was no challenge, only immediate, searing muzzle flashes. Gregor fired back on full auto, the deafening roar in the concrete space drowning all thought. One of Kovac's men fell, the other ducked back, throwing a flashbang into the room. Maria was shoved to the ground behind a washing machine as the world turned blinding white and ear-splittingly loud. When her vision cleared, spinning with afterimages, she saw one of their guards down. Gregor was wounded, blood soaking his sleeve, but he'd shot the second attacker through the door. Go, Gregor snarled at her, pointing to the iron door of the storm tunnel, its rusted wheel just visible in the gloom. The wheel, turn it. Maria scrambled to her feet, her hands slipping on the cold, wet metal. She threw her weight into it. It didn't budge. Years of disuse had seized it solid. A new voice, calm and cold, spoke from the shadows near the wine cellar. Leave it. A third man emerged. He wasn't dressed like the others. He wore a dark suit, now spotted with rain. He held a pistol aimed steadily at Gregor. This was the team leader. His eyes found Maria. The girl comes with me. Kovac wants her alive, for a little while at least. Gregor, bleeding and out of ammo, slowly raised his hands. Maria's hope evaporated. This was it. Captured. Then, from the darkness behind the leader, a shape moved. A silent, swift shadow. A length of steel cable looped around the man's neck, yanking him backward off his feet. There was a terrible, gurgling choke, a frantic thrashing, then silence. Alexander Voronin stepped into the light, letting the cable go. He was disheveled, his shirt torn, but in his hand he held a sleek, black pistol. He looked at Gregor, then at the dead man. "I told you to fall back to the second floor." "The wheel was stuck," Gregor rasped. Voronin holstered his gun and moved to the tunnel door. He gripped the wheel, bracing his foot against the wall. With a raw, guttural shout of effort, he heaved. Metal screamed in protest, then gave way with a shuddering clank. The door swung inward, revealing a yawning, damp darkness smelling of earth and lake water. He turned to Maria. "Go now. Do not follow the tunnel all the way to the boathouse. It will be watched. There is a branch 50 meters in on the left, marked by a red utility paint. It leads to an old drainage culvert that empties 200 yards down the shore near the public walking path. Get to the road, then run and do not look back." Maria hesitated, stunned. Why are you doing this?" For a second, Voronin's icy facade vanished. She saw exhaustion, regret, and a flicker of something like honor. "Because you were right, you were a prisoner, and because he nodded at the dead team leader, reminded me what I used to be before I became a banker in a cage. Now go, the debt is cleared." He pushed her gently but firmly into the tunnel entrance. She stumbled into the blackness. As she turned, she saw Voronin pick up the dead leader's rifle. He looked at Gregor. "Shall we give our guests' men a proper welcome to our home?" Gregor managed a blood-streaked grin, reloading his weapon. "It would be rude not to, sir." Voronin gave Maria one last, unreadable look. Then he swung the heavy iron door shut. She heard the wheels spin, locking her in darkness and sealing her out of the world of Alexander Voronin forever. She ran. The tunnel was a nightmare of dripping water, slick stones, and total blackness. She used the light from her stolen phone, the one Gregor had missed when he searched her weeks ago. She counted her steps, her breath sobbing in her chest. At 50 paces, a slash of faded red paint glowed in her beam. A narrow, crumbling pipe veered off. She crawled into it, the concrete tearing her clothes and skin. She crawled for what felt like hours, until she saw a pinprick of light and felt cold night air. She emerged, filthy and trembling, into a drainage ditch overlooking Lake Michigan. The Voronin estate was a distant constellation of lights and the occasional orange flash of gunfire. Sirens now wailed in the distance, approaching. The police, finally alerted by the noise or perhaps by a tip from the treasury. Maria ran along the shore, then up to the road. She didn't stop. She walked for miles, a ghost in a soaked cleaning uniform, until she found an all-night diner on the outskirts of the city. Using cash from a secret stash in her shoe, money she'd been skimming from petty cash for months, a prisoner's tiny rebellion, she bought a coffee and used the payphone. She made one call, not to her sister, not to the police. She called the number for Agent Colin Bryce, the man at the treasury. When a wary voice answered, she said only 3 sentences. "This is the source from the Voronin estate. Nikolai Kovac's team is there now. The evidence is buried in a public cloud storage account. The login is the serial number from the vault server, all lowercase. The password is the date of the Gdansk port official's death." Then she hung up. She walked away from the diner and vanished into the city. The aftermath played out in headlines over the following weeks. Shootout at Oligarch's mansion leaves 4 dead. Sanctioned Russian tycoon Voronin hospitalized, faces multiple charges. Fugitive oligarch Kovac indicted on racketeering, trafficking charges, manhunt intensifies. The official story was of a violent home invasion turned siege. Voronin, playing the victim, was taken into federal custody on financial crimes, a gilded cage traded for a concrete one, but a cage where he could still breathe. Kovac's operation, fueled by the evidence Maria had provided, was dismantled internationally. The warehouse in Warsaw was raided, freeing 24 people. The story was a victory for the authorities, a neat, packaged narrative. But the deeper truth, the human one, was messier. Maria was never named. In the chaos, she remained a ghost. Agent Bryce located the cloud account. The evidence was overwhelming and credible. He knew who had planted it, but his source had disappeared. A memo buried in the investigation files would later note, primary civilian source secured critical intelligence. Current whereabouts, unknown. Assessment, low probability of re-engagement. For Maria, freedom was not a cafe in Paris. It was a small apartment in a Midwestern city under a new name, courtesy of a witness protection program that Agent Bryce, grateful for the career-making case, quietly facilitated. She worked as a bookkeeper. She lived quietly. The fear was a slow fade, not a sudden erasure. Then, one year to the day after she crawled out of that drainage pipe, a plain envelope arrived at her post office box. No return address. Inside was a key, a safe deposit box key from a bank in Zurich, and a single, typewritten line on a card, for services rendered. The account is in the name on the key. No strings. The name on the key was not hers. It was Sophie Krasnick, a ghost's ghost. She never went to Zurich to see what the box contained. Some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. But she kept the key, a reminder that in the world of monsters and men, she had not just been a prisoner, she had been a player, and she had walked away. Final, surprising detail was not in the envelope. It was in a sealed testimony submitted by Voronin as part of a plea bargain. In it, he detailed his financial crimes with clinical precision, but in one paragraph he diverged. He stated, for the record, that the initial critical leak to the United States authorities regarding Nikolai Kovac had been procured through corporate espionage by a rival firm. He explicitly denied any knowledge of or involvement from household staff. It was a lie, of course, a lie that cost him nothing and protected a ghost. Perhaps it was a final calculation, or perhaps, in the strange economy of their world, it was the only payment he could still make on a debt he finally understood. Maria, now Sophie, sometimes looks at the Chicago skyline from her modest balcony. She knows that in the glittering towers, other versions of her story are playing out in silent rooms. Other cleaners, other drivers, other invisible people are seeing things they shouldn't. The secret rooms still exist. The monsters still walk in daylight, but she is out. And she knows the most dangerous weapon in those houses of secrets isn't the hidden server or the vault. It's the quiet person holding the dust rag, who everyone has forgotten how to see. Maria's story is a modern fable written in dust and data. It's a reminder that in the age of global capital and digital walls, the oldest form of intelligence gathering hasn't changed. It's not a satellite or a hacker. It's a pair of eyes that everyone else has trained themselves to look through. We build palaces of secrecy, fortify them with lawyers and encryption, and then we hand the keys to the people we consider part of the furniture. We assume their silence is bought with a paycheck or enforced by fear. But silence is not ignorance, and fear can transform, under the right pressure, into a formidable, calculating courage. Alexander Voronin saw Maria as a tool, then a liability, and finally, in a fleeting moment, perhaps as a reflection of his own entrapped soul. Nikolai Kovac saw her only as a variable to be eliminated. Both were oligarchs who dealt in the abstraction of power, assets, debts, territories. They failed to account for the human element until it was too late. The most secure room in the house wasn't the vault. It was the mind of the woman who cleaned it. This dynamic plays out in subtler ways every single day. In the apartments of diplomats, the penthouses of tech billionaires, the country homes of politicians, an entire class of people moves unseen. They are the domestic workforce, predominantly women, often immigrants, working in a legal gray zone with minimal protection. Their vulnerability is the open secret that makes the whole system work. But as Maria proved, vulnerability can be a camouflage for tremendous strength. So the lingering question is whether there are more secrets hidden behind the walls of the powerful. The question is, how many of those secrets are already known? How many Marias are out there right now, holding a dust rag in one hand and the fate of an empire in the other, simply waiting for their moment of impossible choice? What did you think of Maria's decision in the end? Was Voronin's final act a redemption or just another calculated move in a game he'd already lost? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of hidden rooms and unexpected power resonated with you, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Share this with a friend who loves a tale where the underdog doesn't just win, but rewrites the entire game. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the shadowy corners of power, secrets, and the people who dare to shine a light. Thanks for listening.